How do you respond when people annoy you, when they pull out in front of you in traffic, when they're unreasonable or unfair? Do you have patient love?
Ouch. Did that step on your proverbial toes? That was Nancy DeMoss Wolgemuth, and I'm Dana Gresh. Welcome to Revive Our Hearts Weekend. We've been on a month-long journey, walking through one single verse in 1 Thessalonians, and it's packed with a whole lot of lesson. And hey, if you missed any of those other episodes, you'll want to check them out at reviveourhearts.com/weekend or go to the Revive Our Hearts app.
And we urge you, brothers, admonish the idle, encourage the faint-hearted, help the weak, be patient with them all, be patient with them all. 1 Thessalonians 5:14.
Okay, so here's 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 14. And we urge you, brothers, admonish the idle, encourage the faint-hearted, help the weak, be patient with them all. And today we're finally to that last phrase, be patient with them all. Patience. I cannot say that's one of my fortes. I like to finish things, and quickly. I'm a fast-paced worker, a multitasker, kind of a type A girl, and that means I can forget that people's hearts are part of the day. Hey, if you can identify, you might need this program as much as I do, so stick around. Now, being patient does not often come naturally to many of us, especially in today's fast-paced society. I mean, all you have to do is take a drive somewhere. Between traffic, other drivers, and road rage, it doesn't take much for our patience to be tested. So, what is patience really? Well, my friend and co-host of the True Girl podcast, Stacey Rudolph, she and I dove into the topic of patience. Now, True Girl is a podcast we created for girls aged 7 to 12 and their moms, but I usually find that the stuff we're saying actually ministers to the girl at heart in me. And I think it will you too. So, what's it look like to live out patience? Well, let's start by examining a passage in 1 Corinthians. Here's Stacey.
1 Corinthians 13:4-5 says, "Love is patient and kind. Love is not jealous or boastful or proud or rude. It does not demand its own way. It is not irritable, and it keeps no record of being wronged."
Okay, let's go back to the original language of the New Testament Bible. It was originally written in, do you remember? Yes, Greek. I knew you would remember. Looking at this language is going to help us understand what does it really mean to be patient. In Greek, the word for patient was used to talk about something, here it is, boiling slowly rather than quickly. So are you ready for this? If we would read the Bible in its original form, maybe it would sound something like this. Love is slow to boil.
So the opposite of boiling mad. And those people in those news articles were quick to boil. I get it now.
Yep. Now picture that. You're that woman who gets stepped on by the blind man. First, you focus on how much your big toe hurts. Suddenly, you feel a little bit like everything inside of you is starting to boil. If you keep fuming, you'll find that before long, you're screaming like a steaming kettle of boiling water.
But the Bible says that true love isn't like that. True love is slow to boil.
Yeah, to learn what that means, let's read the rest of these verses again. They say love is not jealous or boastful or proud or rude. It does not demand its own way. It is not irritable, and it keeps no record of being wronged. So to be slow to boil includes not demanding things go your way. It means when they don't go your way, you do not get irritated. And when someone really does something that could irritate you, even then, you forgive rather than keeping a record of the wrong or making a big deal out of what they did to offend you.
I actually found a news story of a boy named Joshua. And now that you're describing this, Dana, I'm starting to think that Joshua was slow to boil. For the record, this also really happened. True story. Joshua had one of his best days ever. When he got a brand new bike for Christmas, he loved it so much that he rode it every single day. But then something awful happened. He actually saw an older man steal his bike. Joshua cried out for that man to stop, but the man just turned and looked at him. Then he stuffed Joshua's bike into his truck, jumped in the driver's seat, and drove off. Joshua was heartbroken. His bike was gone. He loved that bike. But he was a slow boiler. He asked his mom to help him send a message to the thief. Together, they wrote these words on a poster board and put it at the end of the driveway. To the person who stole my bike, you really hurt my feelings when you took it, but I'm a Christian. And because Jesus forgave me, I forgive you.
Wow. Now that is what it means to be slow to boil. Joshua forgave his enemy, and he demonstrated Christ's love by being patient. Let's be honest. I think we would all be a little bit boiling mad if it weren't for Jesus' love in us, helping us to be slow to boil. Without him, it's not possible.
But let me tell you this, the story isn't over.
Oh.
Guess what? When Josh's father left for work the next day, the sign was face down in the yard. And at the end of the driveway, believe it or not, was the bike.
Wow.
Right? They brought it back. True girl, you can choose to react like the rest of this world with mean words and by defending your rights. Or you can react to mean girls like Jesus suggests, by being patient and forgiving. Be slow to boil.
A true girl knows that true love is patient.
Am I slow to boil? Remember, that's another way to ask, am I patient? Take the rest of this week to practice the slow boil way of responding to problems in relationships. If you have trouble, ask Jesus to help you. He will. You cannot do this without him.
Well, I know that's true. We can't be patient without God's strength. That was me talking with Stacy Rudolph on the True Girl podcast. You know, it might be easier to have patience for some people more than others, but as 1 Thessalonians 5:14 says, we're to be patient with them all, or be patient with everyone. That includes your spouse, your neighbor, your siblings, your kids, the person at the grocery store who's slowing you down, everyone. And when you show patience, you're actually showing love. I got to talk with radio veteran Bob Lepine, also the author of a book titled Love Like You Mean It, when he was a guest on Grounded. We discussed the correlation between love and patience and how it translates to our relationships. This is actually one of my favorite things I have ever learned from Bob, so lean in. Now we're going back to 1 Corinthians 13 again. Here's part of my conversation with Bob Lepine.
Well, let's start at the beginning of this chapter. Love is patient. What do we need to know?
Isn't that interesting that it's the first descriptive term? Because if I sat down with a room of 100 people and said, fill in the blank, love is, I don't think that patient would be the first thing that would come to most people's minds. And yet it's where the Apostle Paul starts. And the word for patience if you've got a King James Bible, you read love is long suffering. Love suffereth long.
Oh, no.
What a place to start by saying, here's what real love looks like. You're going to suffer, and it's going to be for a long time.
Yeah.
And I don't think what the Bible is suggesting to us is that in a marriage or in any kind of a relationship, the goal should be suffering, or we should enable someone who is causing us to suffer. That's not what the Bible's talking about here. But in the reality of life, as we're with other people, we're going to face things that are going to be a struggle for us. Mm-hmm. It's going to be hard for us. We're going to get annoyed. We're going to have unpleasantness as a part of the relationship. We're going to get crossways with one another. And so here the Bible starts by saying, if you love someone, you persevere even when those things are true.
Yeah.
In fact, you go to the end of this passage, or the end of these character qualities, and it says, love bears all things, endures all things. That's really what patience is. It's bearing and enduring even when things are unpleasant. And Dan, I got to stop just long enough to say, I'm not talking about bearing or enduring physical abuse.
Right.
Because the Bible's clear elsewhere. When somebody is abusing you physically, spiritually, emotionally, financially, you should not enable that.
Right.
You are to, if you see a brother caught in a sin, You're supposed to restore that brother. You're supposed to call that out and help that brother or sister grow. But I am saying that in the day-to-day realities of our relationship, we're going to face things that cause us to have to endure, to have to bear, and real love will do that and say,
Yeah.
I'll be with you in the midst of that.
That was a real eye opener for me. I mean, I've read the love chapter, as we call it, so many times, but as I was reading your book and you kind of expanded on this love is patient thing, it really was an eye opener for me. I got married and said, hey, I'm signing up. I want some romance, some babies. I want grandbabies and rocking chairs. And I really hope I get a nice couple of years of long suffering. That'd be really nice if we could have that too. Like, that wasn't in the works, right? But there have been some of those moments. In your marriage, Bob, what have those moments looked like for you and Marianne, where the suffering pops in and love has to take over?
Yeah. I think the darkest season of our marriage, this was back, we'd been married for 4 or 5 years at this point. We had a 3-year-old. Marianne was pregnant with our second child, and I got fired from my job.
Oh.
And so we just moved into a new house. Everything was trucking along, and all of a sudden I'm out of work. And I start looking for where am I going to work? And I found a job. We were living in Tulsa, Oklahoma at the time. The job I found was in Phoenix. Well, Marianne had grown up in Tulsa. Her family was in Tulsa. It's where she had roots and where she had relationships. She's pregnant with her second child. I leave for a month to go start a new job in Phoenix while she stays behind to try to sell the house. While I'm out in Phoenix, one of my jobs is to try to find a place for us to live in Phoenix. So I found a house and bought a house without her seeing the house that we were buying. This is a rookie mistake. I don't recommend it.
Yeah. This was before you could take her on a FaceTime tour, I suppose.
You couldn't do any virtual tour, and she was at home, and we couldn't fly her out to come see houses. So
Yeah.
I bought the house. I remember being on the phone and saying, I'm going to put an offer on this house. And she kind of swallowed and said, okay. And then she came out to Phoenix, and she did not like the house I had picked out.
No.
It's July in Phoenix. She's pregnant. We've got a 3-year-old. She's got no friends. I'm trying to start a new job. And I will tell you, I came home from work most days to find a wife who she was showing all of the symptoms of depression, and understandably so.
Yeah.
But after about 3 weeks of coming home to a wife who is not communicative, who doesn't have motivation to do much. I remember one night being out in the backyard in Phoenix, kind of kicking the dirt and looking up at the stars. And I had this thought. I said, I'm not going to get a divorce because I know I'm not supposed to get a divorce, but I understand why people want to.
Oh, wow.
And it's in those moments that love has to endure and persevere and say, I'm not going anywhere, and it's hard right now. Our marriage is not pleasant right now. I'm not enjoying where we are right now, but I will persevere and endure because I'm committed to you, and we're going to find a way out of this together. And Dana, one of the things I've learned over the years, there was a survey done in the state of Oklahoma many years ago where they went to couples who had been they had filed for divorce, and for whatever reason, these couples had not gone through with their divorce. And they asked these couples 5 years later, how is your marriage today? And the couples who had filed for divorce 5 years earlier now rated their marriage on either a 4 or a 5 on a 5-point scale. 83% of them said it's either a 4 or a 5. When they pressed through the hard times, when they found a way to come together and to say, okay, I'm committed to you, you're committed to me. Together, we're going to find our way out of the pain or the problem or the challenge we're in. God meets you there, and God leads you to a better place. It just happens. I've seen it happen over and over again.
Bob, could you just talk to the woman or maybe man who's listening and they're about to file for divorce or determined to take a friend's phone number out of their digital Rolodex? Because this love like you mean it thing, it's not just about marriage. Relationships are being tested right now. And we're wanting to write things off and take an easier way. We want to take the easy way out. Talk to that woman right now. What advice would you give to her?
Well, and again, I want to be careful here because there are people who are in dangerous situations,
Yeah, right.
and you need to protect yourself, and you need to get godly help and support around you. I always tell people who are wondering what to do in a relationship, don't make that decision in a vacuum. You need community. You need pastoral guidance and support. You need godly people speaking into your life. So get that. But I would say to people who are in difficult circumstances and life is unpleasant and you're unhappy, this is where you've got to run to Jesus and you've got to say to him, Lord, you know where I am. You know what I'm feeling. Meet me here. I need joy from you. I need peace from you. I need not to look to my circumstances or to my relationships to be my source of strength and hope and life. I need you to be that. I need you to give me the strength so that I can persevere and endure. And then I would take them to 1 Peter 3, and I would say, after Peter has talked about wives having gentle and quiet spirits and husbands loving their wives, he says, now all of you, he says, you've got to be compassionate. You've got to be patient. You've got to be humble. And then it says, and don't return evil for evil, but return a blessing instead. So practically, I would say, ask yourself this question: how can I proactively bless my spouse who I don't feel like blessing? I'm not inclined to want to bless today. How can I do something that will be a blessing for my spouse today? Start to sow seeds of sacrificial kindness and love into your marriage and see what God does with those seeds as you seek to plant them today.
Patience is an extremely important factor in marriage, as Bob Lepine just explained. But he also highlighted the fact that no matter if you're married or single, we'll always have opportunities to be patient with people. And if or when you find yourself struggling to be patient, when it's difficult to love, sometimes all you need is a little perspective. Nancy DeMoss Wolgemuth is going to give us a new mindset for those times by reminding us of the patient love God has for us. She's taking us to 1 Corinthians 13, the love chapter, once again. We've referenced it a few times today, but let me just read you verses 4 through 6 before she begins. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love does not envy, is not boastful, is not arrogant, is not rude, is not self-seeking, is not irritable, and does not keep a record of wrongs. Love finds no joy in unrighteousness, but rejoices in the truth. Here's Nancy.
We begin with the first quality of love. Love is patient. Love is patient. Love suffers long, some of your translations say. And that's actually a good translation because love does require suffering. And sometimes it requires suffering not just for the short term, but for a long time. This kind of patience, this long suffering, speaks of a capacity to be wronged and not to retaliate, even when it's in your power to get back. This kind of patience is speaking of being long-suffering with people who really try your patience. People who get on your nerves. Does someone come to mind? This kind of patience is the opposite of anger. A loving person is slow to anger. He refuses to pay back evil for evil. There's no retaliation. It's a kind of love that's willing to be taken advantage of. It's a love that is concerned more for the welfare of others than for how they affect my life. And if you want to have God's love, and if you pray to have God's love, expect that God will probably put some people in your life who are really hard to love. But true love, this long-suffering, long-tempered, slow-to-be-angry love, doesn't look out for how they affect me. It looks out for how can I really help that person and be committed to that person's best interests. Now, this kind of long-suffering love is not just gritting your teeth. It's not just enduring, though there is endurance involved. But it's an active, aggressive long-suffering, investing in the very lives of the ones who've hurt me the most. You know, some of us get a little uncomfortable when we read particularly those Old Testament passages about God wiping out whole groups of people who had sinned, and we think, oh, that seems so harsh a judgment. You know what astounds me more than that is the fact that there's so many groups of people that God never wipes out. It astounds me that God hasn't wiped me out, because every one of us deserves the wrath and the judgment of God. But more often than not, God withholds his judgment. He withholds his anger, and Peter tells us why. He doesn't want any to perish. He wants all to have opportunity, time to repent, to come to the knowledge of the truth. So God is holding back his righteous anger against sin. He withholds judgment, not forever, but for now, so that we can have opportunity to repent. And he calls us to endure, to suffer long in that way. And so in the big things of life and in the little everyday things, God says, love as I've loved you, with a love that is patient, a love that is long-suffering. Do you have that kind of love? How do you respond when people annoy you, when they pull out in front of you in traffic, when they're unreasonable or unfair? Do you have patient love? Are you willing to be taken advantage of? Are you genuinely concerned for the welfare and the best interests of those who have wronged you? That's God's kind of love, and he wants to fill our hearts with long-suffering, patient love, the love of Christ.
When you recognize just how much God loves you and the patience he extends to you, to all of us, doesn't that change your attitude toward the people around you? I mean, it's humbling, right? With the Lord's help, we can be patient with everyone.
Love is patient, love is kind, love is not envious or boastful or arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoices in the truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends. And now faith, hope, and love abide. And now faith, hope, and love abide. These three. And the greatest of these is love. Love never ends.
Getting perspective and seeing the bigger picture does make a difference. That's what Nancy DeMoss Wolgemuth talks about in her book, Heaven Rules. She helps you see the world and your everyday life through the lens of heaven's rule. In the book, you'll walk through the story of Daniel and find comfort and hope when you know and believe that God is on his throne. We'd love to send you this book right now when you make a donation of any amount. We're so grateful for your support of this ministry, and sending you this book plus a bonus discussion guide is just one way we'd like to thank you. You can make your gift by calling 1-800-569-5959 and be sure to ask for your copy of Heaven Rules. That number is 1-800-569-5959, or go to reviveourhearts.com/weekend and click on today's episode. Well, one aspect of patience is the whole idea of perseverance, not giving up, even when we feel like it. And that's what Nancy DeMoss Wolgemuth will address this coming week on our daily program, Revive Our Hearts. And it's also what we'll talk about next weekend on this program. We'll hear from a wife who persisted in prayer for more than 2 decades, asking God to work on the heart of her alcoholic husband. Thanks for listening today. I'm Dana Gresh. We'll see you next time for Revive Our Hearts Weekend. Revive Our Hearts Weekend, patiently calling you to freedom, fullness, and fruitfulness.